Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and great as always to be here with you. And joining me again for this very special part 2 episode is Paul Bindig.
G'day, David. How's it going?
Good. So here we are again. For those that listened to episode 26, we covered the first half or so of David K Mathews' brilliant career. And this is the second part where we get into the nitty-gritties of everything up to and including Santana. But there's a lot more in there than that as well. So enjoy part 2 and we'll see you after the show. And so obviously that level of versatility and variety that you were doing at that stage strengthened your career further. So what would be a third career highlight? I think I know what it's going to be, Dave, but still your choice.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, and we can cover Santana after the three if you want to pick a different third one.
It's pretty obvious. I mean, from her I learned the value of simplicity and emotional honesty, and sincerity, how to communicate, paint with the broad brush strokes, paint in primary colors, tell the story, get the feeling across, and that's Etta James.
Yeah.
I played with her for about 20 years. And we did an average of about 50 gigs a year,
wow.
Which is, not a lot compared to, with the Santana band. I've been doing that for 10 years. It could be 70 to 80 gigs a year. But with Etta, physically she wasn't able to work as much, and the working conditions weren't as optimal and the money wasn't as good for her as it certainly is. Santana has sold over 100 million records, and Etta James is a catalog artist.
Yeah.
She's made 40 or 50 records, but she's a legend.
Oh,
and she's one of the all-time greatest female American vocalists. Really right up there with, it's kind of hard to compare. Up there with Dinah Washington or Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday, or she's not a jazz singer per se, but a lot of people compare her to Aretha, and they were friends and colleagues from what I know. I never met Aretha myself, but Etta never had the commercial success like through Atlantic Records that Aretha had with Cherry Wexler and Arif Arndine and the Erdogan brothers, but Etta was certainly respected as an artist. Struggled with drug problems, drug and addiction issues, and then with weight issues later on in life, and I know Aretha did too. But certainly with weight issues. But I'd have to say that for me, when I started playing with Etta, I had come out of the Tower of Power kind of Bay Area kind of vibe, and I was used to playing in bands where you cut the notes off short.
That's right.
Things were choppy, funky, and Etta really, she didn't want to she never told me how to play. Never told anybody how to play. If you didn't play something that she liked, you would know, but she wouldn't be specific. She's just, with her, it was an emotional thing. And I learned the power from her. I mean, I'm not saying that I have the power, but I watched her. I saw her power and her ability to communicate deep, emotional. I was more of thinking about the notes, things sound this way to me, the notes, the chords. Well, with her, it was all about the lyrics, the story. She's a storyteller. She's just like an African griot, or, I don't even know if that's the right cultural term. I don't even know But I mean, she could communicate across a wide spectrum of people and get them to feel what she was feeling. And that's really an important part of that's a very, being able to tell the story or to get to people, getting people to feel what you're trying to express. You could call it, maybe as a pianist, I would call it creating atmosphere or creating an atmosphere. I think Dr. John, he said, painting pretty pictures or pretty colors. And I remember hearing him say that once. Or I remember Chester Thompson saying, making colors and, those things are all, I think that music in a lot of ways is analogous to other art forms, like painting, or creating images, and moving people emotionally through that. And I'd have to say that she's probably, I learned a lot more from her on a gut level. I guess, one of the things I learned from her is to just reach deep inside and just I guess it's on an animal level. Just if you have to moan and groan and scream it out and yell and sweat and shiver, if that's what it takes to get it out, get it out. Because she did. That was her. She was one of the most honest communicators on an emotional level, musically, that I've ever seen. And I've seen her move people incredibly.
Yeah.
So I put her at the top of the list, actually.
Yeah. No, I mean that. And
I love her.
Yeah. I was about to say that must have been
hard
when she passed in 2012, and her performing career had ended a few years before that, Dave. It's not that that's any consolation, but she had a real
she had to stop singing it was in 2009, just the very beginning of the year. I think that she started having memory issues, and she had a gastric bypass surgery in 2000, had lost a lot of weight, 300 pounds probably. Wow. Yeah. Lost maybe a little bit too much weight. Didn't because she didn't really have that much guidance.
No.
Didn't know how to how to make sure that you take your vitamin supplements, make sure that you drink enough water. She didn't have through whatever dysfunction in her own life and her family life, or she just wasn't able to keep that stuff together. And the sad thing is that right at the very end of her career, she was able to command more money as far as getting gigs, and she was more in demand. She could have worked almost every day if she wanted to. Yes. She could have had a very busy touring career, and she was getting paid more than she'd ever been paid before. And a lot of celebrities wanted her to play at their weddings. Yeah. People, she was in vogue in that sense, and she could have really capitalized on that. She was living comfortably later in her life. She did pretty well, but she wasn't a mega superstar by any means. But she could have. So that was sad, because as her health declined, when her career was really on an upswing in terms of her career trajectory, everything just kind of stopped and kind of ended sort of with a whimper, you could say, just like it kind of just ground to a halt, and she couldn't perform anymore. And then she was the mother and wife at home with dementia and various health issues, and was maybe not I think she was just shy of her 73rd birthday before she passed away, and that's pretty young. Older, certainly older than other people, and she lived a lot of lifetimes in her life, but it was sad to see, and I loved her like a family. You know, I felt like I was part of her family, and I carry her. I keep her close to my heart.
Absolutely.
To this day.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Dave. Obviously, you know, hugely impactful and a big part of your career too. So yeah, really appreciate it.
She was a beautiful person. I mean, I wouldn't want to be married to her. I mean, you know, she could be a handful.
Sure.
In 20 years, I think she might have only been really angry or shown me that she was angry at me maybe once or twice. She was pretty nice to me, and actually, the longer I played with her, the closer and closer I felt to her. I felt I was a little intimidated by her at first. You know, she's a big, powerful woman, and a big, powerful voice, but you know, I got to know her, and I really grew to love her very much. And you know, the thing is, she wasn't a hypocrite. She was, that's the other thing, the lesson I think that I learned from her is that she was incredibly genuine. She didn't take herself too seriously. I think she knew she was good. But she was also insecure. But she was very real, about as real as you can get. Not a phony. No. And that's in my world, that's very important.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best qualities you can have as a person, isn't it? Is to just be yourself and be genuine.
I think so.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah, three amazing highlights. Thank you so much, Dave. I think these days you're probably best known currently as the keyboard player for Santana, which must also be another highlight, getting to perform with that band, I'm sure. I'm really interested, and I know our listeners will be too, in currently, obviously currently no one's touring, but let's say we were. What are you currently using in your rig with Santana? What are you taking on stage with you at the moment?
Okay. By the way, I just saw Carlos today for the first time in about 7 months.
Wow,
I'm going to be recording. We're going to be, he's in the Bay Area right now, and we're going to be recording starting this Monday. Some of the folks in the band, part of the rhythm section, he just wants to work on some different things. He's got some ideas for some things, and we're going to be recording next week at an undisclosed place. And I brought a little bit of my gear over there today because he's got some ideas of some things he wants to do. And I got a lot of work to do over the next couple of days. He sent me a lot of music that I'm going to listen to or transcribe some things. And what I'm using in my road rig, it's kind of evolved over the last 10 years, but the main component has always been a Hammond B3 organ. And because it's an organ gig, it's like Tower of Power was an organ gig.
Yep.
And it's kind of funny because CT was the keyboard player for Santana before I ended up getting the gig, and he was the same thing with Towers. I'm kind of following in his footsteps again, which is cool for me because he's one of my heroes. He's pretty much retired at this point. I think he's 75. He might be 76. I have two Rode chop, we call them, chopped Hammond organs. CT had one of the original style Bill Beer, Beer, out of LA, the Keyboard Products model chopped organs. Bill Beer passed away maybe 15, 20 years ago, and he was very secretive as to how he had all the components in his B3. So if anybody still has one, you have to reverse engineer it to fix anything that goes wrong on it. So I have two that were built by a guy in Oakland, who is pretty much retired now too. He's not in the best of health. His name is Bob Schleicher. His shop in Oakland is called Electronic Instrument Service. I have two, we call them Schleicher chops. They look like Keyboard Products organs. He uses some Trek 2 parts in there, like Trek 2 preamp, I think, for the solid state preamp or whatever it is. So I have two cut down B3s. They're both set up for bass pedals. And I have a couple of Bob Schleicher modified Leslies. They're biamp Leslies, JBL 15-inch bass speaker, a Dayton 100-watt treble driver with a. So the way they're biamped is that you use a stock Leslie 40-watt, 40-watt Leslie tube amp to drive the high frequency driver so that it breaks up like a tube Leslie. And then originally there was a 300-watt solid state amp to power the bass speaker. That was a kind of a cheap import amp. And so recently, just this year, our keyboard tech and I, we got together on it, and we've replaced both of the high powered Leslie's amp bottom amps with 500 or 600 watt. Actually, I think one of them has got I think both of them have. One has got a Quilter, which is was the parent company of QSC, a Quilter 800 watt bass amp in there, and the other one has another. So they've got two biamped Leslies. We have one on stage right behind me, and then one back in an isolation booth, back off stage in a road case, in an isolation case. Yeah. So Hammond organ is always the most important thing. There's about 80% Hammond organ on any Santana gig. I've gone through different pianos, digital pianos. I used a Yamaha. First I used a Yamaha let's see, a CP5, which is pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's
had a Yamaha CP5. Then I got a Yamaha CP4, which is a lighter, and I thought it had better. It had more synthesizer sounds and stuff too, which was kind of good because I would use it for other things. But lately, I've don't tell Yamaha this, but for the last year or so, I've been using a Korg Grand Stage because I like the action better, and I like the Yamaha CP4. It had a lot of nice sounds, but once again, the Yamaha can be a little bit daunting in terms of on the fly editing and changing things while you're playing. The CP5 was better. You could actually adjust for like Fender Rhodes sounds or Wurlitzer sounds. You could change the speed of the vibrato with just a knob. Things like that were good, but on the CP4, because it's a cheaper, lower end model and lighter, much lighter, you've got to go through some screens to get into. And I'm not, you don't have time for that when you're playing. You got to go through some screens to change things. So I just kind of tried to set up the best sounds I could get on it. Now I have a Korg Grand Stage. What's cool about that is you can you can adjust things. There's more buttons. It's got more of an analog layout where, first of all, it has great Fender Rhodes and Wurlitzer sound sets and some decent little synthesizer pad types of things and a couple little string sounds. So I always basically have three keyboards with Santana: a Hammond organ, a digital piano, and before I had a Yamaha Motif XF6. Now I have a Yamaha Montage 7. I use that mostly for strings and ancillary synthesizer sounds, like just different things. vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Use it for vibes. Use it for it's a Swiss Army knife. And actually, I use a digital piano generally for acoustic piano, Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzer, some clavinet, keyboard instruments like that, occasional pad type things. Oh, and I have a Farfisa.
Okay.
I added that about a year and a half ago. I have a Farfisa,
cool.
a red Farfisa combo compact. And the reason I have that is because Carlos has an interest in Afrobeat music, and they use a lot of transistor combo organs and that stuff. And he likes the early 70s Miles stuff when Herbie and Keith Jarrett and were using whatever was the state of the art at the time, which they hated, but it was usually a Farfisa or a I think Herbie played a Farfisa. I think maybe so I finally just said, listen, I got to stop trying to do this with my one synthesizer, because I only have one synthesizer. I want to get a dedicated. It's a bit of a finicky little cheap combo organ to take care of on the road. It's not the most roadworthy instrument, but it's been hanging in there, and our keyboard tech has really been pretty good at taking care of it. He's a electronically very together. So I've got 4 keyboards now. Yeah, the Hammond B3, digital piano, 1 synthesizer, and the Farfisa, the cheese machine. The Farfisas are basically just a large, cheap electronic accordion for the most part.
Yeah, they've got that sort of really thin, characteristic transistor organ sound. That's for sure. But it's very idiosyncratic.
And that's the other thing too, is Carlos loves the Doors.
Okay,
right.
It's so funny. He'll say it a lot of times. He goes, what the hippest band in me was, in the 60s, not this, not that. He goes, the Doors. There's something about them that are so psychedelic, and I think it's the spoken word poetry thing, and they were very. I grew up listening to them on the radio too. I was just a kid. I wasn't a teenager like Carlos. I was, 7 or 6, but I remember those hits on the radio, and personally, I never. I don't think Jim Morrison was a great singer. I think Billy Idol got his one lick from Jim Morrison, and I think Billy Idol probably wins the Jim Morrison the singing the lip sync contest. But they had some, they were progressive and psychedelic at a time when that was kind of a new thing. So I can see why Carlos digs them, and I'm glad that I got the Farfisa now because I can try to evoke some of those vibes for him, and it's a lot easier doing it on there than it is to do it with a one keyboard, one little synthesizer, So there you go. That's what I got.
Yeah, that's great, and that brings me to my next question, Dave. And I'm going to set this up a bit by saying that, having watched Santana when they've come here to Australia, and I've watched Santana play with CT, and I've watched them play with you twice. And one of the things that really struck me as an audience member was the way, or the stage configuration for your organ and your keyboards. And I'm just going to describe it to the listeners who may not have seen it. So Dave sets up, he's right at the front, stage right, which is to start with, fairly unusual for a keyboard player to be right at the front of the band. He's right up at the front of the stage, but then his organ faces backwards towards the middle of the stage, almost not quite, but nearly at a 45-degree angle. And then he's got an L configuration, and his piano and his synthesizer is pointing out towards at an angle to the audience. So I'm interested, Dave, as to how that came about. It's quite unusual. It looks pretty cool, but I'm interested in how you started and why you started doing it that way.
Well, when I joined the band, I was always on stage right, and I always wanted the organ pointing in, because I play the organ on the majority of the music. I wanted the organ, and I'm right next to Carlos. Carlos is just to my left.
Yes.
When I'm when I'm facing out to the front. He's just to my left. So he's to the and Carl Perazzo. Well, Carl Perazzo is next to me, and then Carlos is next to him from the drums. I always generally whatever instrument that I'm going to be playing, the majority of my parts, you could call them, or whatever the instrument I'm going to be playing the most with any given band, I want it facing in towards the rest of the musicians. And in this case, Carlos, I have to watch him a lot because he changes things a lot while we're playing. We take a lot of left turns and right turns, and we go in different directions. There's a lot of just kind of verbal or physical cues. He'll just wave, or he'll start playing something, and so I got to follow him pretty closely. Once again, I'm being an accompanist, just like I was with Etta. Carlos to me is like a singer. It's like I approach playing with him like I approach accompanying a singer, trying to kind of create the atmosphere that he wants and give him the emotional pushback or feedback to whatever he plays. I want to push back against that and either push him to play better or play, whatever. So the organ is always facing inward, across the stage, basically, really stage. I mean, you might have seen this when I was on a riser, and they might have angled the riser a little bit, but really the organ is pretty much should be facing directly from my side of the stage, stage right, directly across the stage left. The piano, when I first joined the band, things were angled a little bit more. And what I was finding is that when I played piano, so right now the piano and the synthesizer are facing out directly towards the audience, but I can still look over my left to Carlos.
Yes.
And I can see him clearly if I look to my left. So the piano might be angled just a little bit slightly, and maybe the riser with the organ, maybe all of it is angled just a little bit in, so that when I'm playing the piano, when I first started playing, we had the piano set up so that I had my back to the audience, it was kind of like my back was sort of to Carlos, and I couldn't see what he was doing, and it was hard. I was starting getting a stiff neck trying to keep an eye on him. So, and right now, the only thing now, the Farfisa is facing directly back, behind towards the backstage. So when I'm playing that, I can still look over my right shoulder across the keyboards of the Hammond, and I can see Carlos and the rest of the band, but my back is to the audience. But then I don't play. I don't use that instrument. No. Sometimes on a gig, I never use it at all. But then sometimes I'll use it on 2 or 3 songs. So really, the whole idea is to be able to be able to see Carlos and accompany him, and also to be able to see the other musicians. As far as me being out in the front, that's just the way they, because of the depth of the stage, that's just kind of the way they set it up. Sometimes I'm further back from the edge of the stage. I think the idea is that they like it where I'm kind of in line with Carlos when he's standing up front at his vocal mic and playing, and also where his acoustic, they have an acoustic guitar set up for him on a stand. I'm usually kind of lined up with that so that we look right at each other when we're playing, and and then there's a little box that they put like at the front of the riser where when he wants to play some pretty stuff and get into more of his ballad style playing, he'll sit down literally right in the corner between where the piano and synthesizer and the organ meet. They put a little box right there, like a little place for him to sit, and he'll sit there and he'll play sitting down. Not the acoustic guitar. He plays his electric guitar that way, and that's when he's playing some more lyrical and things and melodic things and some jazzy things, as opposed to him rocking out and going the full on scream, singing, screaming thing. That's when he's playing softer and he's playing prettier. He likes to sit there. And I think that's pretty cool because it changes the atmosphere. I'm right behind him, so once again I'm accompanying him like if he was a singer or a horn player. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's visually
Actually.
interesting for the audience, I think.
Yeah, I like the dynamics of that a lot. Now, speaking of loving dynamics, Dave, I want to talk about briefly. We're on the home trio of questions here, but your fantasy vocal sessions albums. So
Yes.
you've got 2 volumes of them out. First one was out in 2018, sort of mostly jazz and acoustic influence,
Yep.
and then the soul R&B one with volume 2. Love these to bits. What made you? What was the impetus for you deciding to do those, and what have you got planned with them?
Well, if you own physical CDs, the liner notes on both volumes are pretty clear about kind of what my vision was and what motivated me to do this in the first place. But just to make it quick, around 2007, I'd been playing with Etta for quite a while, and I had saved a little bit of money, and I thought, I'd like to. It's been quite a while since I made a record of my own. I'd like to make a record. I'd like to make a record with some of my favorite singers that I've worked with. I want to have Etta on it. I'd like to, have Maria Moldauer on it, who I worked with, for a long time, and others really, Tony Lindsay, who at that time, just different singers that I work with. Basically, a lot of the people that are on both of those records, I was like saying to myself, well, I'd like to make a record, and really, I thought just one record, and have each of my favorite singers sing maybe one song, use some of my favorite players in the Bay Area, something for my own personal satisfaction, and then by the time Etta's health kind of fell apart, the economy fell apart. What savings I had, which is really not that much, but it would have been enough to get started on this project. I lost my savings. I had no money. I was really struggling until I got the Santana gig. And then when I got the Santana, because with Etta, I'd played with her for 20 years, and suddenly someone that I had made half to 2/3 of my yearly income, I wasn't working with her anymore, and I was really having trouble making ends meet. Right. So the whole idea of making a record went out the window. Then I got the Santana gig. I started making some good money, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, Etta's, by 2012 or 2013, I was saying, well, Etta's gone now, and God, I really wish she could have been on this, but I'd still like to make a record with people that I love and have influenced me in the Bay Area. So it's really the whole series, and there's 2, and I plan for there to be at least 2 more. And it's eclectic. The first record was straight ahead jazz standards album. Second record is soul and rhythm and blues. I have a lot of tracks recorded with some of the people from the first 2. For volume 3, it's going to be more straight blues.
Right.
And then volume 4, I also have some tracks that I recorded last year with some of the guys in the Santana band that I'd also like to have Carlos play on a couple tunes. And he actually said that he expressed an interest in doing that. That would be the Afro-Cuban and Brazilian record. With all of my favorite people here in the Bay Area, and maybe some nationally known people as well. It's just, I love all those kinds of music. I love every kind of music, really, whether it's, any various kinds of Middle Eastern music to music from India or music from Brazil or China or different music from the United States or the Caribbean. Some things I'm better at playing than others. I love reggae. I've played on a couple of reggae albums many years ago, but it was just something that I don't know if you call it. It's a legacy type of a project. It started out as I wanted to do some things with people that I cared about, and I thought it was just going to be one record. But then once I started really working on it in 2015. And recording some of these tracks, I I went into Fantasy, which is closed now, Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, which was it's known as the home that Creedence built because it was Creedence Clearwater Revival's success. And I believe it was the movie. They had a film division too. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Wow.
Was their first. Amadeus. There was the Saul Zaentz company. Amadeus. Actually, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Creedence was pretty much I think the impetus that launched Fantasy Records and the studios. Well, the studio closed about 2 years ago, sadly. But I recorded in 4 days. I went into the studio and I recorded about 10 to 12 tunes a day in a 8 to 10 hour session. With about 15 singers actually, and so I still have some tracks left. So originally I thought I was going to make one record back in 2007. And then in 2015, I realized, well, there's no way that's going to happen. I'm going to have to make several records. And I recorded about 35 tunes in 4 days. It might have been maybe 40 tunes, but and as you see, Volume 1 and Volume 2, that's maybe 26 tunes right there. And I have about maybe 7 or 8 jazz tunes from the first 2 days of recording left, and I have about 6 or 7 blues things from the third and fourth days of recording. But I'm going to have to augment those with some recording done at my place here or at another studio because, of course, Fantasy doesn't exist. No. But I'd like to put out two more volumes, and the name and the Fantasy Vocal Sessions. The idea was it's based on Fantasy Studios. Yeah. But now that the studio is gone, it's like, oh, hey, I was going to have a 4 or 5 CD set, but now the studio's gone. How can I call it that? Well, I'm just going to, because it was kind of my fantasy to do. That's right. So it's a play on words. It was my fantasy to. It's a love letter to Bay Area music and all of the great influences in our culturally diverse area here surrounding the San Francisco Bay that has helped me to become the musician that I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I can't recommend highly enough to our listeners to have a listen to these, and we'll be linking to them in the show notes. So yeah, they're incredible pieces of work, and looking forward to the next installments. And it feels a bit blasphemous, Dave, to go on to the next question, which is one we ask every guest, which is the biggest train wreck you've had on stage. So some awful thing that's happened to you, it doesn't matter which band or artist, just something you've never forgotten.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, let's see. That's interesting because, well, no, it's funny because I don't generally. I'm a pretty positive person, and I try not to take. I'd have to think over the years. I mean, I know there were negative things that have happened to me musically over the years that caused me great anxiety, but offhand, none of them have stuck with me to the point. I mean, I don't remember ever like being so mortified where somebody was like, "Hey, you mother," playing, you suck. I don't remember anything like that. But oops, whoa, that's weird. I don't know why that's going off. Oh, yep, there we go. I can't. It's funny. I was just talking to Pete Escovedo and one of his kids the other day because I did a gig with them on Saturday. This is kind of humorous. It was somewhat traumatic at the time, but I'd say it was humorous. I was playing with Pete Escovedo at the Herbst Theater in San Francisco. Pretty nice venue. Herbst or ST, Herbst Theater. This is maybe 10 years ago, playing with the Pete Escovedo Latin Jazz Orchestra. And I had a kind of a big rubato piano intro on one of their big songs of the set, where I get a chance to stretch out and play some Spanish influence kind of stuff, quasi-classical.
Yeah.
And I was, and you know, it could be long. It could be a minute. It could be a minute and a half. It could be 2 minutes if it really gets going well. So I remember playing some stuff, so classical influenced things, building up to a nice, conclusion, and really felt really good. Like, wow, this is creative. You know, I think I'm getting the message across. As people are feeling the gypsy, the Gaetano vibe, and I'm trying to be like a classical pianist, like Horowitz or somebody who, of course, I really admire, like a lot of those men and women. And so I played this good intro. Long story short, I played this good intro. It's getting really good. It's building up. I'm building it up, and I get to the climactic point of my introduction, and I go to this big crescendo, and I go boom, 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 after playing all this virtuosic stuff, and I go boom, boom, boom on the piano, and right as I do that, the stand breaks. The piano is still attached to the cables. It dumps. The stand breaks. It literally breaks. It goes, and the piano is dumped halfway into my lap, halfway on the floor. It's still plugged in, and it's a digital piano. And in the process of falling, the demo button goes on. Whatever it was, a roll. I think it was a Roland. The demo button goes on. I'm done playing, and like the piano is falling. I'm trying to keep it from landing completely on the floor. It's still plugged in. I'm in front of 800 people in this beautiful theater. The band was waiting for me to finish till we could start the song. And the piano is halfway on the floor, halfway on my lap. I'm holding on to it, and it's playing by itself. And I'm going, what the hell is going on here? I'm looking at it. These lights are flashing, and it's playing some silly demo song. It might have been a classical song. It might have been some silly pop song that some guy had put into, or woman, whoever had put into the thing. Because, a lot of these digital pianos, they have a bunch of demos. You hit a button and it'll play this thing, and then it'll play that thing. So the demo's going. And first of all, I never have ever used any of that stuff on this particular keyboard, because for me, it's just a piano. I never had really investigated any of those extra features that the thing had. And so the thing is playing by itself, and I'm looking at it, and the band's looking at me, the audience is looking at me, and I'm like, what the hell? And and the lights are flashing. And so I'm trying to frantically find, how do I turn this thing off? How do I make it stop doing what it's doing? It took me maybe 15, 20, 30 seconds. I don't know, longest seconds of my life. And then the band started the song, and we didn't have a crew or anything. I'm like fixing my stand and trying to put this thing back on there. I don't even remember what I did. I had it on my lap or something, but by that point, so that was pretty funny. It was, it would have been amusing if you'd been there. And then of course, I was talking to Pete and one of his sons the other night about this, but and it's like people would kid me about that afterwards for quite a while.
I love that.
It was unexpected, It was definitely unexpected.
That is gold.
But it wasn't my fault. The stand broke. Yeah, I'm sure it would have been It would have been amusing. I don't recall when a band leader per se has been has necessarily humiliated me on stage while I was playing.
That's right. And this is more, now what you've just described there is the perfect train wreck. That's more what we'd like to find out about. So that was brilliant. That's the first ever demo song one too. I think that's just absolutely funny as.
Oh yeah, the thing was playing, I don't know, it was playing some piece, but it was loud. And I was like, and I'm holding the thing in my lap and I'm hearing all of this sound come out. And of course it didn't register to me. I'm like, what? It took a few seconds and I realized, wait, this thing's playing by itself. Now what do I do? So, it was good times, as we say here. Good times.
Feedback to Roland, don't make the demo button so easy to hit when you're trying to save your keyboard from falling off the stand.
Exactly. I think that might have been a Roland FP4.
Right.
That's all I had at that time. FP4 or an FP7. I think it might have been an FP4. That got stolen out of my car at the time when I didn't have enough money for another digital piano, and I liked it. It had a nice action actually, and it had decent piano sounds at the time. But yeah, that demo button, woo.
Yes, there you go. It's funny. We sometimes talk about those demo buttons and why we even need to have them, to be honest. But there you go. Great story. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. Now we're coming to
I think they need a little handguard on them, so you don't.
I reckon they do. 100%. I reckon they do.
Yep.
So we're now heading to the last question that vexes all of our guests, which is our Desert Island Discs question. And we would love you to share with us, if you can, 5 records that if you're stuck on a desert island, you could not live without, and they can be really anything you like to listen to, any style at all.
Okay. Well, let's see. I think that this is going to be fairly easy. Wow. Okay. First of all, anything by Art Tatum would be number one.
Yep.
And that could be any of the Pablo stuff, any of the Decca stuff. It's got to have, if you're a pianist, I mean, as a pianist, for me, you got to have one Art Tatum record. Well, God, it's going to be 2 Brazilian records. That's only going to leave me 2 records. Woo, man, yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to decide. It's going to have to be one. Antonio Carlos Jobim and Elis Regina, Elis and Tom. Maybe number 2.
Cool.
Coming from a keyboard perspective, it's going to have to be one of Jimmy Smith's Blue Note albums from the mid to late 50s. And I'd have to get specific with you on that, but
that's okay. We'll approximate one. That's no problems.
Yeah, it could be. There's several. There's a bunch. Okay, it's 3. All right. Wow, this is going to be. I'm going to be leaving out a lot of people here, but for me, Donny Hathaway live in performance, and not Donny Hathaway live, but Donny Hathaway live in performance on Atlantic. And that's, I got to have at least one singer, because on the last one I'm going to go back to pianists. All right. And man, it's like, all right. For me, it won't be that hard. Alicia de Larrocha, the Iberia Suites, her first recording from the late 1950s. I believe it's in mono. The Iberia Suites were Isaac Albeniz. Isaac Albeniz, it's a suite of 10 Spanish, Spanish classical. He was a Spanish pianist and classical composer, a Spanish nationalist composer, if you will. God, I'm leaving out a lot of stuff. You're leaving out Horowitz, Richter, Rubinstein, You're leaving out Fats Waller, Ray Charles, Professor Longhair, James Booker, Billy Preston. God, but I left out the Beatles.
Yeah, that's all right. Beatles are common as mud, David, in top desert island discs.
Can we do? Oh my God!
You get David, just very quickly. You get an honorary sixth. We do have to wrap up. You get an honorary sixth pick because a lot of our guests do that. They pick six.
It's got to be. Well, for me, it's got to be just because my brother, the Beatles. Well, I have to say this. To me, the Beatles and Stevie Wonder are the greatest. I don't want to use the word pop, but popular writers and artists of the last half a century or more. And so I'd have to say, if I get an honorary six, my brother had Magical Mystery Tour when I was growing up. And I'm just going to put that one out there. Magical Mystery Tour. I got to put a Stevie Wonder album, but everything he did on Motown during the golden age from about 1971 to about 1980, every record he made is incredible. I just got to put that out there too, because they're really, and if I had to be on a desert island and there was nothing else, I'd have to say it would probably have to be the Beatles and Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
If it was just two, if I had two choices, because both of those artists, there's such an incredible range there. It encompasses all different kinds of music.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
great picks, Dave, and they're certainly eclectic, which is what I'd expect no less given your own eclectic and versatile career. And I can't thank you enough for taking the huge time you have with us today. It's been an absolute honour talking with you. You're one of those guests that we could easily devote 10 episodes to, and don't be surprised if I gnaw you down the track for a follow-up episode. But it has been absolutely
I'd be very happy to do that. I'm sorry for going over by 41
not at all.
minutes.
That's not a problem at all. It's absolutely
no. We've really enjoyed it, and thanks for being so generous with your time and with your thoughts, Dave. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I can't wait to get back over there and visit your lovely country again. And I'm hopeful that if things get better, we had a European tour scheduled in March, and we haven't been to Asia since 2017. But I'll just say Asia or the Pacific region. But we had our last summer we had a major U.S. tour booked with Earth, Wind and Fire, a double bill. Wow. And as far as I know and that was through Live Nation. And as far as I know at this point, everything has been moved to this next summer. So, right. And that would be touring the U.S. Last year we toured the U.S. all summer with the Doobie Brothers, and this year it was going to be Earth, Wind and Fire, and that's still on the books as of this time.
No, great stuff.
So I don't know when I'm going to get down under, but I hope it's sooner than later. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, no, the feeling is mutual, and we look forward to definitely coming and seeing your great work. So, yeah, no, lovely speaking with you. So, Paul, I said in the introduction that David K Mathews had a brilliant career, and I think for those that have listened to both parts now, it's a bit hard to refute that.
Yeah, absolutely, and clearly a fixture in the Bay Area music scene for multiple decades, but his reach and influence clearly spreads far beyond that as well.
It's just amazing, and I think we could have gone on for another 2 hours and still had an absolute ball. So huge thank you to David for spending all that time with us. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, what a gentleman.
Yeah, really good. So once again, we will be back again in 2 to 3 weeks, but just a reminder again, also, I've used again about 4 times in that sentence. You can keep in touch via a few means. So our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com. We're at Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles. On Twitter at twitter.com, the keyboard CHR1. And if you like good old-fashioned email, then drop us a line at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. For those not on Twitter, get on Twitter just for Rick Wakeman. He alone's worth joining Twitter for. If you'd like to become an official supporter, we do have a Patreon account where for the price of a coffee a month, you can help us go from strength to strength. And that's at patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles. Paul, thank you again, sir. Always appreciated.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, David.
And to our wonderful listeners, thanks as always for listening, and we'll see you back here next episode.